we are FreedomFest TV, and welcome today. You can share in the upper left-hand side. You'll see a button that says share last 30 seconds. That's a really great thing to do to pull your friends in, let people know. It goes straight to Twitter, and it records the last 30 seconds. So especially if Jeff or Terry or any of our guests say something really cool and groovy, just click that. It's going to keep it and then tweet it out. That's fantastic. I did share a little tweet in the chat that you can just copy and paste into Twitter or type something like that. That would be terrific. We'd invite your friends to join us. With that, let me turn it over to our host today. Our host is Terry Brock. He is the former chief enterprise blogger of Skype, the former editor-in-chief of ATnT's big blog, award-winning business blog. He's a member of the Hall of Fame of the National Speakers Association for Professional Speakers. He helps people all around the world with marketing and technology. With that, I give you the MC of Freedom Fest 2016, Terry Brock.
Gina, thank you very much, and welcome to all of you as we have a real exciting time today here on FreedomFest TV. We're joined by a man that I know as a friend, admire him greatly as an entrepreneur, and he's going to give you some ideas on how you can make money around the world being an entrepreneur and kind of have a good perspective of what's going on in the world today. And we're going to do that. But before we get started with that, those of you that are joining us right now, we see, by the way, we have a Keith Preston. Join us, Keith, if you're out there. We're glad to have you on board today. And others that are joining, you're going to be able to pop on and ask questions. It's one of the nice things about using Blab is that today you get a chance to come on the screen. You can, of course, leave your messages there with the live chat, and that will be good. Be sure over on the left side to tweet out messages. If you hear something, you go, hey, that's really good. You can send that out as a tweet so that the world will be able to hear it, and we'll be able to send out a lot of good information that way. Well, let me tell you about our guest today. He is, like I said, a buddy of mine, a friend. I've worked with him before. He is a founder of Stockhouse, which was a major tool for getting the word out about how to make money, how to invest in stocks in Canada, and it became the largest in Canada. Well, he was there. Of course, he was born in Canada. He's an entrepreneur and a world traveler. So you want to be sure if you got some questions to ask him about how you can do that in a freedom lifestyle. He also is a founder of an event called Anarchapulco, held in Acapulco, Mexico, about living life freely without harming anyone else. Live free and not bother others is kind of the theme of that. And he works with Bitcoin. He is described as a libertarian and an anarcho-capitalist. And so what I want to do is welcome aboard Jeff Berwick. And Jeff, as we get started, I want to ask you, as you join us here on Freedom Fest, like you often get to do on your YouTube channel, Anarchast, how did you become an anarchist?
Switching the tables on me. Thanks for having me on, Terry and Gina. Great to see you. I saw you both, of course, at Anarchapulco, and you mentioned Keith Preston at the start there. He was at both Anarchapulcos. He spoke at the first one. He didn't even let me know he was coming to the second one, or he would have spoken at that one, or he might have spoken at it. I wasn't there half the time. I had dengue fever. So, but how did I become an anarchist? I think that I think we're all born anarchists. Obviously, no one is a baby, little tiny little child, and just learns how to talk and says, "I want to violently control other people. I want to steal their money," and all this kind of stuff. I've never seen a baby like that. I think it's a conditioned cult, actually. I think statism is a cult that many people, especially in the U.S., have been indoctrinated into. And so over time, and that's when they send them to their government indoctrination camps, which they call schools. And it was Vladimir Lenin who said, if you give me your child for 4 years, the seed I plant will never be uprooted. Now they have them for 12, and then they make them go for another 4 after that and charge them $100,000 to get their Bachelor of Arts or their women's studies piece of paper, and then they're in debt for the rest of their life, mostly being indoctrinated the entire time into the cult of authority that this is how it has to be. We were born, we have to go and show up every day at 9 o'clock in the morning and leave at 5 and do what they say. And if we don't, we're going to get in trouble, or they're going to hit us, or they're going to take us away from our parents now, which is going on a lot. So this is actually it's a cult that people believe in. Government doesn't really actually exist. So when you ask me how I became an anarchist, we were all anarchists. I I don't think I ever bought into the cult, though. I was when they first sent me to the government indoctrination camps, of course, when I was really young, like 8 years old or whatever, I kind of didn't mind it. I didn't really like it, but I didn't mind it. I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. I'm outside of my house and there's other kids around and we're kind of doing some fun stuff every now and then. But by the time I got to around 11 or 12 years old and I'm sitting there in biology class, which I couldn't care less about, or physics class or chemistry or social studies, which is the worst, which is studying propaganda from the government about how great the government is and memorizing dates. By that point, I had had enough and I essentially didn't want to go anymore. And I did a deal with my mom where I just went for the tests. And I would actually just read the book about an hour before the test, write a bunch of stuff on my arm, memorize a little bit of the rest, and get 50%. I always try to aim for 50%. And I pretty much got it in most of my classes just to get, because my mom said, you need this piece of paper, which I've never needed, by the way. I've never been going around this week. And so I said, can I see your high school diploma? I'm not sure I should be talking to you. I need to see some sort of documentation that you went through 12 years of indoctrination. So I don't think I ever bought into it. And then I went into the business world, and I guess you could say I'm kind of entrepreneurial minded. I'm always doing stuff, creating things, I guess you could say. And I just did that for a while. And then it was after you brought up stockhouse.com. It was after that imploded after the year 2000 when the tech bubble burst, that my company went from $240 million company to almost worthless, that I decided to look into what's really going on in the financial system. That led me to The Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin. That led me down a whole other path of looking into Austrian economics. At the same time, I'd always felt this affinity. I always liked Doug Casey. He had been a person. Every time he wrote something, I said, that's what I think. I can't believe no one else is saying this, but this guy, that's what I think. And he actually says it even way better than I do. And he's thought about this stuff way more. Yeah. And so after a period of time, I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm whatever Doug is, that's what I am. And then he's like, well, I'm an anarchist. I'm like, okay, well, what is that? And he actually had dinner with me, and we were in Vancouver because we were publishing his information on our site, which was the top financial website in Canada, still is to this day, stockhouse.com. And so he was in Vancouver, and we had dinner, and he said, he asked me questions, a very Socratic method sort of thing, not trying to push things on anybody. And he asked me what I thought about this and that. And at the end of it, he said, you know what you are, don't you? And I said, no. And he said, you're a libertarian. And I'd never heard that word before. I'd never heard it. So I thought he meant like liberal or something. I was like, well, what's that? And he's like, he tried to explain what libertarianism was. And he said, it sounds like you just believe in freedom. And I was like, I guess so. I'd never really thought about it. I just hadn't thought about it. I didn't think this was something you had to even really think about. To me, it was just, I was always living that way. I just wanted freedom. And then we talked a little bit further, and he said, you know what you are, don't you? And I said, what? And he said, an anarchist. And I said the same thing that a lot of people still to this day will respond. And I said, you mean those people who throw bombs? And he's like, no, that's not what it actually is. So that's what led me down the path to understanding that I was an anarchist, but I think I always was.
Okay, so we're born that way. We believe in freedom and liberty and not impinging on others. And at Freedom Fest, we have people that range from a variety of political views. I think it's one of the healthy things about Freedom Fest. We get a chance to hear many different points of views, and it sharpens our mind to hear others. But as we look at anarchy and what it is, we're talking about what I understand you're saying is it's not someone that is also often associated with throwing Molotov cocktails and violence. Matter of fact, correct me if I'm wrong, you abhor the initiation of any kind of force or violence. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. That's what an anarchist is not wanting to be ruled by others and not wanting to rule others. It's no rulers. That's the meaning of the word, the Greek meaning of the word. Where it gets a little convoluted and a little complicated is where you draw the line on defending yourself against that violence. Because, of course, the government is definitely aggressing against you. It's using violence against you if it's trying to enforce its arbitrary laws where you're not hurting anyone else. So if you had a marijuana plant in your house and a SWAT team came in, you rightfully could defend yourself and try to kill all those cops. I wouldn't suggest it. You're probably going to die, but you'd be in the right. They'd be in the wrong. They would be the immoral ones for coming into your house and trying to accost you when you weren't hurting anyone else. So that's where the line can get a little fuzzy. But what I've said all along, and what I still say, and I don't think I'll ever change on this, because I don't see the violence as being the answer to fixing a violent problem, is that we can't fix this issue of this constant violence in our lives of the state by attacking it violently. That's, in the U.S., they have a little bit of a history of violent rebellion. Actually, in many countries they do, in France and others. But I don't think that's really the answer. And if you even look in the U.S. or in France or anywhere where they violently overthrew the regime, they just put in another violent regime afterwards. The whole thing is that we have to get humanity to awaken to their own self-power, that they should not feel like anyone has the right to rule them, to have authority over them, to make them do things or steal their money. And so it's actually really a mental exercise. It's a mental game. It's a spiritual game to some extent of who owns you. And unless we can get people to understand enough that they own themselves, and they should never let anyone try to own them without their permission. If you want, a lot of people actually don't mind people owning them. They're called status. They don't mind a government owning them and telling them what to do. That's fine, but just don't make other people do that. But if we're ever going to get rid of the state, it's not going to be through violence, I don't think. It's never happened in the past. And I think it's going to have to be a awakening up, a conscious awakening. And actually, I'm seeing that happening all around the world right now. So it's a very interesting time.
Yeah, it certainly is. We're seeing a lot of people waking up to realize we need to take responsibility. I think that's really the flip side of it. You take responsibility for your own life. You don't ask someone else to sacrifice their life for you, nor do you sacrifice your life from another person, much like we heard in The Fountainhead as Ayn Rand talked to us. And we're seeing a lot of that today. And a good way that's happening that you're involved with, I want to tap into it while we got you here, to tap into that genius brain of yours, is entrepreneurial activities are popping up all over the planet because of technology, and there's much that's going on. Be very interested in what you see that is happening now, that because you're talking to a lot of people in many different countries. What are some of the most encouraging bright spots of entrepreneurialism and new business activity as you see it around the world?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I've seen so much change in the last few decades, and I think it's been all made possible thanks to the internet. I think before the internet, I don't think there was any chance. I don't think there was any chance of us getting out of this problem of a massive state control authority regime system. And I think thanks to technology, we have this opportunity now. So what's been really exciting to me has been in the last 10 years or so, especially since the internet has been around, but it didn't really seem to develop too much until about 10 years ago. All of a sudden, all kinds of things are coming online that actually negate any last reason that some people might think they need the state. Bitcoin's an excellent example. I write the dollar vigilante. I'm talking all the time about how I think all fiat currencies are going to collapse. I talk about how central banks are one of mankind's biggest enemies, the other one being the government. And a lot of people used to ask me, well, what do you think will come and take its place once the US dollar collapses? And I used to say before Bitcoin, I don't know, but I'm sure the market will come up with a solution. Maybe it'll be gold, maybe it'll be silver, maybe it'll be some digital version of them. You really don't know with the market. And then Bitcoin came out in 2009, right at the height of the financial collapse, which was just amazing timing, almost like a gift from God in some ways. It was quite just amazing. So that has changed the game. And now we're seeing still to this day, and I've been into Bitcoin since $3 in 2011, that there's so much going on. This is actually changing the world of money and banking. It's going to change it. You can't actually stop it. The only way to stop it would be turn off the power in the internet, which they actually are considering. That's why they talk about the internet kill switch all the time. And even when they're talking about what could happen, they talk about EMP attacks and stuff. So we could see a false flag EMP attack to turn off the power grid if people start to wake up enough that they don't want to be owned anymore. So the Bitcoin is a massive evolution in money and banking. It's not a revolution. Again, it's not violent. None of these solutions need to be violent at all. It's just creating a new system that makes the old system obsolete, which Bitcoin has done. Now, if you look at the world today, it's quite amazing. If you think about it, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, probably, none of these companies that I'm about to mention existed. And today, the biggest hotel company in the world is Airbnb. They don't own any hotels. Today, the biggest taxi or ride company in the world is Uber. They don't own any cars. You could just go on and on. Amazon is the biggest. They don't own any stores. Everything's becoming virtual. And because of this, because government is a very physical sort of a thing. That's why Bitcoin is so exciting, is because you can't turn off Bitcoin unless you turn off the internet. So there's no Bitcoin CEO. If there was, he'd already be in jail because they would go after that person for trying to change the system. There is no Bitcoin office. If there was, they'd already have sent SWAT teams there to shut it down. But now things exist in the cloud, so to speak. So we really have, technology has enabled us to very easily surpass the state now, and to actually get rid of it, and actually to wake people up. And this is what happens every day, and what I try to do all the time is try to show people, it's like, what do you prefer? Like this crappy, monopolistic government taxi that's smelly and old and crappy, and the driver treats you like crap, he doesn't even know what he's doing? Or do you like, you press a button on your phone and the free market, a guy comes there and it's usually a really nice car and he gives you a bottle of water and he asks you how you're doing? Which one do you prefer? And most people go, yeah, definitely Uber. And I like to point out, that's the market. The market is always so much better than any sort of monopolistic communist style centrally planned sort of a thing. It shouldn't be, I shouldn't have to explain this to you. A lot of Americans who say they're against communism and, we're the great because we're the USA and we have capitalism. You don't have capitalism, really. But I have to explain to Americans why capitalism or why free markets work so well, which is crazy, but that's how bad the US has gotten.
Yeah, exactly. Well, now I want to go into an example of something. You mentioned Bitcoin and opportunities for making money, and something that you're involved in and that I'm involved in as well. Full disclosure is a company called Watch My Bit. And we're seeing what's being done with that and how you use that with a recent conference that you had, an Anarchapulco, other people involved, where you're able to split that using Bitcoin. Tell us a little bit about that. And those of you that are entrepreneurs, watch and listen to what he's talking about here, because this is something that is an enormous revenue generating opportunity. It's just one example of what can be done with Bitcoin. Jeff, tell us a little bit about what's going on with that and how you've been involved in it.
Sure. Yeah, Watch My Bit is just one of literally thousands, if not tens or hundreds of thousands of new services being put out by entrepreneurs right now that are taking advantage of the new infrastructure, which things like Bitcoin and blockchain are making possible. So Watch My Bit is essentially a disrupting the video streaming market. So for right now, if you want to have a video and you want to put it on somewhere like YouTube, but you want to get paid for your content, it's getting harder and harder. Google's really got almost a monopoly on that now, and they're shutting down anyone who's trying to speak any kind of truth sort of stuff now. It's becoming very censored. And as well, you can't really just put up a video and share it very easily to share the revenues with other people. But Watch My Bit has taken advantage of the blockchain technology and Bitcoin to make it so if you just make a video, say you have a band and you just record a small concert, let's say there's 500 people there, and you want to sell the video for $2. First of all, you couldn't do that anywhere because $2 is too small for the archaic dinosaur style Visa, MasterCard banking sort of system. The what's called micropayments, they really still can't even do that. It doesn't work within their system. But you can do that with Bitcoin. You can do as small as 10 cents on Bitcoin, and it still makes total sense to do. And as well, with the band sort of idea, you could actually give the drummer, the guitarist, the singer, the guy taking the video, you could give them all a certain percentage of the revenue from the video. And as soon as someone buys it, which just takes a click of a button, all those people get paid immediately. So that's just one small one of literally thousands of innovations coming out right now that are going to change everything. If you think back to it, Terry, as I pointed out earlier, 10 years ago, there wasn't even smartphones. The Apple iPhone didn't exist 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. I forget when Google and Facebook and all the CIA and NSA and FBI sort of backed sort of companies started, but it wasn't before 2000. So let's just say 15 years ago, none of those things existed. Facebook didn't exist. YouTube didn't exist. And now look at how that's changed the world in the last 10 years. And what's happening now is it's exponentially speeding up, especially thanks to decentralized technologies like the blockchain. So we could see what happened in the last 10 years happened in the next 3 years and be even bigger. So people are trying to put things like Uber on a decentralized platform right now. Things like Airbnb. There's one called Slock.it, which is doing a decentralized autonomous organization IPO fundraising right now, which actually has already raised almost $200 million from Ethereum currency, which didn't really exist up until a couple of years ago. Things are going crazy. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're into technology, you are born at the right time. The only other time to be born would have been at the start of the internet. And I was there for the start of the internet. So I'm kind of happy to be around for the second sort of wave, which is happening now, which is going to be more of a decentralized internet. But the real key is going to be how much control the government has over the internet and how quickly we can get it out of their control. They're rushing as fast as they can to get it under control. John Kerry even said recently, this internet thing is making it really hard to govern people. So they're trying to get it under control. They're losing control because there's literally millions and millions of us and just, thousands of them. But they're going to do everything they can to keep it under control. So it's a real race. It's a race between the market and the government. Whoever wins will either have a world of complete peace and prosperity like we've never known it if the free market wins, or we'll have a world of tyranny like I don't think we've ever known it if the government wins. That's the stakes right now.
Yeah, so the stakes are pretty high, but I think it's looking good for the opportunities that are out there. Yes, we are aware of what's going on. We see the news. We see what's happening in the United States. We see the very challenging, to say the least, election that's coming up and how people are frustrated on both sides. And yet, when we see what the free market has done with Bitcoin and with the infrastructure that you can now literally make money from just about anywhere in the world, you go there, and if you have talent and you can add value to the marketplace and you can help people to solve problems that they have, then you will be able to do well. And as far as getting paid, like you were saying, Jeff, Bitcoin opens up a lot of opportunities there. We see what Doug Scribner is doing with his Watch My Bit, and the possibilities there are enormous that people can get involved. And I like the way that you can divide that up whatever way you want. You can give somebody 10% of this or 1% or 2%, and you can charge whatever you want because you're going out to the net and it's ongoing. It's a continual source of revenue that's there. What other opportunities do you see for entrepreneurs as you bounce around the world? I know you've been over to Libertyland and being able to see new countries that are coming about. What other opportunities are you seeing for entrepreneurs in starting new businesses in today's environment?
Well, I think just from the technology standpoint, the opportunities have never been greater. It's really quite unbelievable to see the progression last 20 years. When I first started on computers was the 1980s, actually. 1982, when I was 12 years old, I built my own Apple II Plus clone computer, which I had to order from the back page of a magazine from Vietnam and build with myself with a soldering iron. And my dream was it had 48K of RAM, not megabits, not gigabits, kilobits of RAM. And my dream was to get 64K of RAM because then my Apple II Plus clone computer would run so much better. But I remember thinking back then, wouldn't it be amazing if all these computers were all connected? And so I was thinking about what would happen with the internet. And then it started to progress towards that with bulletin board systems. And I was very involved in that. And then when the internet came out, I was super excited. But it really, like I said, it took a while for the internet to really get going, for everyone to really get on it. But now, thanks to things like smartphones and all that, everyone's on it. The opportunities are endless, obviously. It's just, and it's so easy to work from anywhere now. Which is really interesting because once you can sort of remove yourself from a geographic region, that's what again, governments are all physical. They have a really hard time with virtual. And so once you sort of remove yourself from a geographic region and you're not their geographic tax slave so much, you can actually get outside of these taxation systems all legally. I don't actually care if you do it illegally, by the way. Actually, I hope you do. I hope everyone does. We need to turn off this beast, and that's the best way is to stop the funding to them. But you can actually legally stop, not have to pay taxes anywhere just by moving somewhere. And you can just make money so easily via the internet today. You're asking about other entrepreneurial ideas. As a person who's traveled to about 100 countries, as being an entrepreneur, pretty much within 1 or 2 days of being somewhere, I see opportunities. It's just obvious. It's just like light switches. I'll just give you one example. I was in Trinidad and Tobago about 2 months ago on my way to go to Venezuela to be one of the only people who's gone inside Venezuela in the last few months to see what's going on with their collapse and the end of socialism and the hyperinflation. And I was in Trinidad and Tobago, and it took me like an hour and a half to get a taxi. And it's just very small. The city itself is not a massive city, but I just could not get a taxi. And I was like looking to see if Uber was there. Uber wasn't there. Someone there should just try to find a way to bring Uber there, and they'll make some good money. It won't make money off the bat, of course. That's entrepreneurship. It might take even a year or two or even more, and it might be really hard. But if you want to, those opportunities are everywhere. And I see them one of the things I like to say about the U.S. is it's like the worst of both worlds. It's got so much regulation, so much taxation, so much government involvement in everything, almost more than most other countries in the world at this point. And then at the same time, just because of how the U.S. was a long time ago, there's still a very big entrepreneurial spirit in the U.S. So a lot of people, they're always thinking about money. They always want to make money. They're always talking about business ideas and all that kind of stuff. You don't see that so much in a place like Mexico. If I go down on the street here, no one's talking about, oh, I see this opportunity. They're just having fun. They're dancing on the beach, drinking beer or whatever, which is fine. But what I say about the U.S., why it's the worst of both worlds, is you have all this oppressive regime, there's regulations, all these sort of things. You have jump through hoops. It was John Stossel who said it costs about $40,000 to open a child's lemonade stand in the U.S. now and take about 3 months of filing documents and permits and applying for insurance and health, get your health inspection and all that kind of stuff. And at the same time, a lot of the population is very entrepreneurial. So if there ever is an opportunity, you'll see everyone competing for that opportunity in a really hard place to do business. So that's why I say the U.S. is like one of the worst of both worlds. And so once you get outside of the U.S., and I mean almost anywhere, there's almost always way less regulation, way less tax, way less government involvement. And then there's way less entrepreneurs in general. Most places don't have that culture of entrepreneurism. And so you could go almost anywhere. And like I said, I could probably go anywhere and within a day see 10 decent, nice sized business ideas that anyone could do with a small amount of capital. And you just have to get out there and see it. Because even here in Mexico, I'll give you an example. A lot of places still don't have websites. This is 2016, and there'll be like a hotel, a decent-sized hotel, might be like 50 rooms or something, might be doing good business, everything. They might not even have a website. And if you ask them, they've never really thought about it because they're not that business focused. They're not that money focused in a lot of other cultures. So as a person, I would just come here and just, of course, learn Spanish, which actually only takes a couple of weeks. Really, it's not that hard. It's very easy to learn. I've spoken like 7 different languages in my life. I've been in China for a few months and started speaking Cantonese, Guangdonghua, Yamagauchoa. If you want to, you can do anything, and it's so easy. So yeah, you just come to a place like Mexico, learn the language a little bit, figure out what's going on, try to connect with some people. That's also important, and that's a big part of what we do at the Dollar Vigilante. We've got groups around the world of anarcho-capitalist entrepreneur expats, so you can get on the ground somewhere, already know people, find out what's going on, and very quickly start up a business. So even here in Acapulco, if I wasn't already doing 1,000 other things, and if I needed to make some money, I would probably just go around to businesses and offer to start a website with WordPress, which now takes 5 minutes to do. Take a few photos, upload, done. Charge them $100, which isn't a huge amount of money even here, and do like 10 a day, $1,000 a day. The opportunities are everywhere, but most people just don't. Because they don't teach that in the government schools. They don't want anyone to create their own ideas, to be creative. There's actually not anything ever taught. I don't think there is an entrepreneurs class in high school in the U.S., but that's all it should be. And actually, I teach my kids. They're pretty much unschooled, and they just almost every day they come up with business ideas. My son actually has so many great business ideas that actually I thought were stupid at first, but as he talked about it more, and he's only 11 years old, by the way, I was like, yeah, you're right. Like he sees business ideas all over the place. But if you go to the normal schools, that's not what they want you to do. They want you to be a manufacturer, show up in your cubicle, do those sort of things. So that's why most people can't see it, but it's really not that hard. It's just about the only thing an entrepreneur does is seize an opportunity. And usually, here's a little tip for people. I usually just think of things I want. So when I was in Trinidad and Tobago, I was like, I really wish there was Uber here. And there isn't Uber there. So as an entrepreneur, it's like, well, let's figure out how to get Uber here.
Yeah, why not get one going?
Yeah. So even when I started my financial website in Canada, there was no financial website in Canada at the time that was giving stock quotes, and I wanted stock quotes. So I started it myself. So I just recognize things that I want, and I figure I can't be the only one who wants these things. And then I just started up, and that's how you go. And so as an entrepreneur, you just find a thing that you want. That's the easiest way. And if it's not being offered, find a way to offer it, and try to find a way, if someone else is offering it, try to find a way to offer a better service or a cheaper one or the other. And that's it. It's super simple. I don't know why it's so hard for people.
That's what the free market is all about, to be able to find those opportunities and to let them happen. Matter of fact, speaking of those opportunities, I want you to tell us a little bit more, maybe some of the inside stuff here for the Freedom Fest audience, who many are watching this. You have 2 channels that are on YouTube. As a matter of fact, how I got a chance to know you and my partner, Gina Carr, who's our engineer here on Freedom Fest TV. We saw your Anarchast, and we also saw the Dollar Vigilante. 2 distinct channels. There's a little bit of similarity and crossover there, but they have 2 different purposes. Tell us just kind of in a nutshell, the Raiders Digest version of what each one is, and those entrepreneurial ventures that you started coming into Mexico, not knowing much of anything there, but getting a chance to get it going. And you've started their thriving businesses now with literally hundreds of thousands of views on a regular basis. How did you work with those? How did you get them started? And tell us about that.
Yeah, I don't know which one to start with first. I guess the Dollar Vigilante I started first in 2010. So this was another example of me seeing something that I wanted. I could see that we were headed into very changing times. It was actually after 2008 that I realized, and I understood the economic system to a point where I realized we're nearing the end of this system. And so I looked out there and I didn't really see anyone talking about this stuff. I didn't see anyone saying how the Federal Reserve was founded or how this whole central banking system is a big scheme to impoverish the 99.99% and enrich in the 0.0001%. It's not 1%. And no one was talking about it. So I thought, well, I'm going to talk about it, because I actually started it, just like many things, out of passion. I just wanted people to know what I knew, because I thought it was fascinating. And if people knew this stuff, it would actually really affect their lives quite a bit, and they would make different decisions that could either help their lives a lot or make them a lot of money. So I started that up. And that was 2010, and it's now the largest, fastest growing financial newsletter in the world by far. There's nothing even close.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. And again, it's just passion. I just do it every day. I love it. And that's another thing about entrepreneur things is you got to do what you love. If you don't, you might do okay, but you're never going to do that well. And there is people out there who love widgets. There is people out there that love like really, very mundane sort of stuff.
Sure.
There's people who just love it. And those guys should do those things and put their passion behind it, make the best widget possible. And if they do, and they put the passion behind it, you're almost always going to do well. It's never going to be straight up though. It's entrepreneurship is going to be crazy. You're going to go from rich to broke numerous times. But it's really not about the money. It's actually about following your passion. That's what life's really all about, is what I found out. And so I did the Dollar Vigilante. That's really blossomed. Where, as I mentioned, it's just going huge right now because we've been telling people what other people haven't for 5 years now, and everyone's starting to realize that we're right. And so now everyone's paying attention to us, which is great. So that's a growing company. We've got a lot of people who work for us at that or work with us. I never have employees. I have partners, essentially. I have people I work with. There's no boss necessarily, although if I'm not happy, they're not going to be working with me too much longer. But it's not really about that. It's about creating things. So the Dollar Vigilante is doing well, and then I started Anarchast. That's an interesting one because that was pure passion. There was no thinking about anything about making money or anything. The Dollar Vigilante was, yeah, I'm going to start up this financial newsletter and we'll get a bunch of subscribers, we'll make money. But I'll also do it because I'm passionate about it. But with Anarchast, it was just pure passion. I also recognize, this is 2011 or so, that most people still didn't really know what anarchy was. No one was really certain people were doing certain things in certain areas, but there was no one sort of area that was sort of telling people what's going on. Like a sort of a central sort of a person was saying, hey, this guy's doing awesome. Like Larkin Rose, look what he's doing. Let's interview him. Adam Kokesh, okay, he's doing really great stuff. Let's talk to him. Get them all on some sort of one platform that people can find out what's going on, what these people are doing. And also spread the word of liberty and what true freedom is and what anarchism truly is and how it's a truly peaceful and beautiful philosophy, which no one was really talking about back then. Even 5 years ago, it was a totally different thing. A lot of the so-called anarchists back then, they were more kind of the angry types, we don't like the world, complainer types, which is fine, whatever. But that's what most of them were. But I saw it as, we don't need to be that way. We can actually build our whole new world than we actually have. So many past Anarchast guests now. We're going on, I guess, about 5 years, had about 300 anarchists on now. So many of them have already changed the world. We've had on, I can just name off the top of my head, so many. Joby Weeks, who actually was the person who made it so marijuana was actually an issue to go be decriminalized in Colorado. He was the one who went out, got all the signatures, all that kind of stuff to get it on the ballot in Colorado. Within a couple of years, marijuana is being decriminalized around the world. That's amazing. That's one person who's just changed things. And there's literally dozens and dozens and dozens of others just like it, who have changed the world, that have been on our show, who are anarchists, who are changing things. So I started that out of just a passion, but now it's actually sort of developed into something even bigger, which, you never really know how these things are going to go. And as you know, Terry, you were our MC last year at Narcopoco, which is sort of a spin-off of what I've been doing at Anarchast. So
exactly.
I started the Anarchast 5 years ago, just wanted to get this out there, get this information out there, just passionate about it. But as I'm getting more and more of these people out there and people are catching on to it and really liking these people, I started to realize maybe these people wouldn't mind once a year coming to the beach in Mexico and kind of hanging around all these kind of people. And again, we're on Freedom Fest right now, which I'm a big fan of Freedom Fest. That's why I'm going to come there and speak there. But the one thing that I noticed about Freedom Fest was it wasn't just for anarchists. It wasn't just for voluntarists. It was more broad based. And there was really no conference doing just a truly anarchist freedom conference. So I started it up. We started that 2 years ago. The first year I had no idea what to expect, and it actually exceeded our expectations. The second year did really well. You were just here, as you know, about 500 people. And I think we're going to get close to 1,000 next year, 2017, end of February. So that's another branch off of just following my passion and just being sort of entrepreneurial and realizing that people want things, and why not offer it to them?
Yeah, it's a great way to live life, and it's fun, and you're making money and living freedom, and you're doing that. Now, matter of fact, those of you that are joining us right now, live here, we are using a technology now called Blab, and it gives you the ability to come on board. If you would like to, just click on that call in button. You'll see that there, those of you that are joining us live. And you can come in and ask a question to Jeff Berwick and be able to be on the screen. We would love to have you. Just click on that once and you're there. Make sure your webcam is working. Make sure your microphone is working. And we would love to hear from you. Jeff, I really appreciate what you're saying, but I got to ask you one question here. It's going to be real important because before you had said that you wanted to stay away from the United States because of the hassles and the problems that were there. And yet, you have now decided to come to Freedom Fest. And so we're honored, very honored that you're going to be there. But tell us, if we can kind of look behind the scenes here, why Freedom Fest, of all places in the United States, is that the one place where you would come?
Yeah, I've been going to Freedom Fest since I think around 2010. I can't remember exactly. And I always enjoyed it. I always thought it was definitely the best Freedom Conference around before I started in Acapulco. But I always enjoyed it. I thought it was just an amazing group of people, amazing energy, thousands of people from all different kind of walks of life, sort of a thing too. Objectivists, minarchists, constitutionalists, all kinds of people, but generally around the topic of freedom. And I thought it was really great. And so I hadn't gone, I don't think, for the last 2 years. I used to speak at it all the time. And about 2 years ago, I believe I said, I'm not going to go to the US anymore. And the reason was because I was just finding it was just getting too hard. I was almost always arrested when I went there for absolutely nothing, literally nothing. I'd almost always end up in handcuffs, which is really uncomfortable. I'm getting kind of older now. I don't want to be in handcuffs and in sitting.
Not a good thing to be in handcuffs.
Yeah, and I'm the kind of guy who, I won't be really nice to the cops, and so I kind of push a little bit of it on myself. So realizing that, I thought I should just not be around that sort of an area where this is a risk, because I don't want to be in handcuffs and all that kind of stuff. And I also found that in the U.S. it's just so much regulations and stuff. So I'd be trying to smoke somewhere, and the cops would come, and people would be calling the cops. It's like slave on slave action. Like he's within 15 feet of the door, and there's a sign that says he can't smoke with. It's just like all this stuff that I can't deal with as a freedom loving person. Of course, if it's private property, that's fine, but it's always these government laws. And so I just decided a couple of years ago, I'm like, I've had enough. Every time I go up, I have a bad time. So I'm not going to go anymore. And actually what changed my mind, Terry, was I actually had to go accidentally to the US recently, like about 3 months ago, sort of like a flight sort of got changed, and I decided to visit my dad, who happened to be in Phoenix at the time. And actually I had an okay time. I didn't get arrested.
Really? Well, congratulations. Not getting arrested is a good thing.
When I came into the customs guys, they didn't really ask me many questions. And I was like, oh, maybe I can come here and have an okay time sometimes. So I started thinking about that. And then I started thinking about how much I really enjoyed Freedom Fest. And I thought, aside from Acapulco, if there was one place I'd really like to go once a year, it'd definitely be Freedom Fest. I actually just missed it. So I kind of played all this through my mind. I said, you know what, I'm going to go back to the U.S. I said I was never going to go back, but I'm going to go back, and we'll see what happens. If I end up in jail or a FEMA camp, then this is going to look funny looking back on later when people watch this. But I just think Freedom Fest is that good of a conference. I think it's really enjoyable. That's the main reason I want to go. And so many great people that I really enjoy being around are going to be there. And of course, almost all of them are anarchists, like Doug Casey and Jeffrey Tucker and so many others. Yeah. And so many just regular people, not sort of celebritarians or famous people, but just regular people that I know are all going to Freedom Fest. So I just decided I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to come to the USSA this year and see what happens.
Well, we're looking forward to it. And Freedom Fest is a great place to do that. And by the way, on a technical note here, we have Electricity Hacker who's trying to break in. We keep trying to bring this on. Maybe Gina Carr can help us out a little bit on that, trying to click and bring this person in. But for whatever reason, our technology isn't. What we might do is maybe cancel that. And then Electricity Hacker, if you would, maybe refresh your screen. Often that cures a lot of different ailments that might come from time to time. We found that works here, but we definitely want to hear from you. And those of you that are watching also, we'd love to hear from you. And it's going to be a wonderful time at Freedom Fest. One of the things, Jeff, you probably noticed this because you've been to Freedom Fest many times. It's really an intellectual feast. It's a great place to be. You'll hear a lot of different opinions. Some of them you'll agree with. Some of them you go, ooh, I don't know if I agree with that, but it helps you to think. And I find being around a group of people that say, we, generally speaking, do not believe in the initiation of force or coercion. Always nice to have those kinds of people around there with us. And Electricity Hacker, I think we see something. We see a spinning fan there on the screen. I don't know what that is, but there could be a human being behind that. I don't know.
Hello. So I have a question for you guys. Obviously, freedom is important. A big part of that is monetary freedom. So what's a good way to get rich?
Okay, Jeff, there's all kinds of, you got about 400 hours here. I think we can do it. Jeff, I'm going to turn that one over to you. A good way to get rich.
Well, I don't know if you were on earlier, Electricity Hacker fan guy, but we actually talked about a lot of entrepreneurial ideas earlier. Were you on earlier?
I was not. No.
Okay. Can you play this back? Can people watch this later, Terry?
Yes,
or is
this
this
is being
just
recorded and will be on YouTube. So we'll be there
Okay.
for later use, which, by the way, we recommend you do that even if you're watching right now live, because there's a lot of items that are mentioned and you might miss them the first time. Usually one exposure to new material doesn't help you to remember it that much. So go back and watch it. But Jeff, go ahead.
Well, I would just say that to Electricity Hacker, just to watch what we said earlier, we talked for 20 minutes about how to do these sort of things. So definitely check out this on YouTube once it's live.
It's cool. And how do you feel about the Bitcoins? Because I see, obviously, you're fighting the central banks. It seems to be the best alternative at this point, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin is the biggest hope we have to getting rid of central banks. It actually makes the central banks obsolete, and they know it. It's going to be very, very interesting what's going to happen. It's definitely something to watch if you're into freedom at all. That's actually been one interesting thing to me was when I first found out about Bitcoin in 2011, I was involved in a lot of Austrian economics groups with like very big name Austrian economics guys. And I was trying to tell them around 2012, I'm like, you guys should be watching Bitcoin more than anything. This is the creation of a new money out of nothing that is has the potential to actually change the entire world of money and banking. And for many years, many of the Austrians were very against it because it didn't adhere to some one theory of how money gets created by Ludwig von Mises or something. And I kept telling them, I'm like, yeah, it's just a theory. It's not, the Bitcoin actually is turning into money right now. So it's absolutely fascinating to watch if you're interested in these things. Of course, for people who don't care at all about money and banking and economics, it's not interesting at all. But it's incredibly interesting to see this money come out of nowhere and actually potentially have the potential to take down every central bank and every fiat currency in the world in the matter of a few years, which it's on its way to doing at the moment.
Yeah, you can see that. All right. Well, Electricity Hacker, any other questions?
Well, one more question.
Sure.
How are you guys doing today?
We're doing very well. And how are you doing?
Doing well. All right. Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
Very good. Well, thanks for joining us. All right. And those of you that are joining us also, you see how we can do that. Just click on that option to come on in and we can bring you in. Gina Carr might be able to come in and give us some more information on that. But the technology we're using today, I know a lot of techies, a lot of people that are into technology are watching this. We're using a tool called Blab, which is from blab.im. That's as in India, Mike. And Blab gives you the ability to have this kind of tool. It's something that we would encourage you to look into. Matter of fact, Jeff, you're seeing this for the first time. What are your thoughts on Blab so far?
Yeah, I really like it. It's very clear, very easy to use. Seems a little bit better than the Google Hangouts from the times I've used Google Hangouts. So yeah, it's my very first time. It's I like it so far.
Yeah, it seems really good. For looking at it, Gina Carr and I take a look at it to see what it's like. We're familiar with Google Hangouts, particularly with the Webinar Jam Studio option you can put on top of this. This seems to be a little bit easier to bounce in and bounce out to see what's happening there with it. Now, Jeff, another thing I want to ask you about, this one might be a little bit more controversial, but hey, you and I both deal with controversy. There have been some scenes in the news talking about Acapulco itself, where you are, which, by the way, behind your shoulder, is that a picture behind you, or is that really what's going on with Acapulco right now?
I think that's real.
That's real. Okay. Yeah, very good. So those, I mean, we always sometimes wonder, is this a green screen or something? But it's real. Now we hear about pictures of things are bad happening there. We see, there's supposed to be murders and gangs, and we hear all that. I've kind of learned as a jaded journalist myself, be careful in what you believe that's in the regular news media, but you're right there. You literally have feet on the ground. You're looking at, tell us, what's the situation like in Acapulco, Mexico now?
Well, I'll give you a little bit of background so you kind of understand where I'm coming from. I came into Acapulco on my sailboat, which I was trying to sail around the world, and I sank in El Salvador a little bit later. And I stayed in this bay in Acapulco, not this bay, but the one next to us here. And I just loved this place. There was something about this place that was raw. It was actually very anarchist. It was no one here likes the government. No one cares about any government laws, and everything goes just fine, in my opinion. Of course, There's just like any large city, there's problems. But in general, I'd much rather be here than almost anywhere else because of it. And so I remember one of the first articles I read in the newspaper, or I saw in the newspaper as I was walking by when I came here, was that people had cut off the heads of 8 cops and were rolling it down the street. And I was like, that's interesting. Definitely don't see that in the U.S. In the U.S., it's usually the cops who are beating up people and kidnapping people, and here they're doing it to the cops. So I was like, okay, this is kind of my kind of place. Not that I like violence. I don't think violence is at all the answer. But I think, if I had to be around people, a place where the government and the cops are beating up everyone and kidnapping people and robbing people, or the people are actually beating up the cops, I'd rather be in the place where the people are beating up the cops. There's that old saying about government, if they fear you. You know that saying, Terry? I'm always bad with quotes. If government that fears you, when the people fear the government, you know that quote?
Yeah, it's saying when the people fear the government, it's tyranny. When the government fears the people, it's freedom.
Right, exactly.
That was Thomas Jefferson who said that.
Yeah, there you go. I'm so bad with quotes. Thank you. But that's exactly how I feel about it here. So this place is definitely raw. Many times, if the cops go and cause problems for people, they will go and light the police station on fire and stuff. I'm just used to that for the last 10 years and I have no problem with it. I'd rather be around these kind of people than the other way around, as I mentioned.
Jeff, excuse me for interrupting, but that sounds like what we saw with the founders of the United States, those that broke away from England. They were the ones that were actually doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. All the founders of the U.S. would be terrorists in today's lingo. And I'd just rather be around people who just won't stand down to authority, to government, and who don't want it and will stand up to it. And so that's very much why I spend a lot of time here. Recently, though, this is very interesting, Terry, and I haven't told anyone this yet, and I'm working on it right now. I'm actually putting together an investigative report and video on it. But about a month ago, there was it was international news about how the drug cartels had come in and started killing all the cops. And again, I was like, okay, well, I have no problem with that in general. I don't like violence, but if people are going to do it, I'd rather be around those kind of people. But it turns out that it was almost all fake. It was a hoax. It was a false flag attack. And I haven't told anyone this yet, and I'm going to be putting this out next week. I'm been going around asking people. Even the governor of the state says it was a false flag. Nothing actually happened. But if you actually read it in the news, it sounds like Acapulco is a war zone. It sounds like everyone's just getting killed and murdered. And I asked my wife, because we live here, like you can see right behind me, we live right here. I was like, is something going on? And she's like, what do you mean? And I was like, in the international news, it's saying Acapulco's like gone crazy. It's the worst place in the world to be. And she was like, no, it's fine. Nothing's changed. And I was like, what's going on? So I went and I've been interviewing people this week around here, asking them, is anything going on? And everyone's like, no, we don't know what this news is about. So it gets into a long story about the reasons why they're doing it. But in general, and you told me this before we were on, Terry, like you don't believe much you see in the media, and you're right to do so. Almost everything is not what's going on. And that's what's going on here. There's really nothing going on. It's another beautiful day in Acapulco. As you know, it's a beautiful place. No major problems. Everything's fine.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you sharing that. And folks, you heard it here first, an exclusive for FreedomFest TV, what's going on in Acapulco. And we see that. And I think what we have to do, I live in Orlando. I'm in Orlando right now. Gina and I are here. And Orlando, like any major city in the United States, has problems. There's areas of town that can be a little less safe than others. And yet it's relatively peaceful. And so I think a lot of it we've got to look at in generally what we hear on the news media with a grain of salt. It's out there because when you think about it, their job is not necessarily to report the news. I can say that as a journalist myself. Their job is to get you to read the ads, reading the ads and take care of their customers who are the advertisers. So always remember that. As you say, it doesn't mean everything is wrong. It just means I think a healthy dose of skepticism is a good thing to have. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, well, I'll probably butcher another quote here, but I think it was Malcolm X who said, be careful reading the newspapers. It'll have you hating the people that you should be loving and loving the people you should be hating. And I think it was, I'm a quote butcherer, but I think it was Mark Twain who said something along the lines of, if you read the newspapers, you're misinformed. If you don't You know that quote? I'm so bad with quotes.
I don't know, but I'm going to have to agree with on the chat. Do you see over there was John Leask? We thank you, John, for saying that. Said we should buy Jeff a quote book. I think we might have to chip in on that, and maybe with Bitcoins get a quote book or something. Gina Carr, you're joining us now. What do you think? Should we take up a collection here and get Jeff a quote book?
I like his version of it better. My mother used to make up words to songs all the time and sing them. So I like that a lot better than the real thing. So I think that's great. The Jeff Berwick version of them. So
John Lee said maybe Mark Skousen's book. I think that'd be a great book to get. Mark Skousen has several out there, and that's a great idea. Thanks for the comment.
Yeah, fantastic information you guys have been sharing. And I know you're going to be wrapping up in just a few minutes.
The quote book
Jeff, I was
Google,
so happy to hear that you were going to be at FreedomFest again this year. That's where I met you a few years ago. I don't know if you remember, but I was that crazy girl out by the bar at the banquet. I said, I've got to have a picture made with you, please, Jeff. So it's going to be fantastic. Let me tell you guys a few of the other fantastic speakers that are going to be there and special events. Judge Andrew Napolitano, Steve Forbes, Peter Schiff, Doug Casey, Bill Bonner. I mean, this is Libertarians Utopia. Grover Norquist, Steve Moore, Senator Rand Paul is going to be there, and he'll be having a special luncheon with people who pay a little bit extra to have a special luncheon with Rand and get a copy of his new book called Taking a Stand. Let's see, there'll be an opening night reception with George Foreman, and George Foreman will be speaking too. So if you're interested in coming to Freedom Fest this year and you haven't gotten your ticket yet, you'll get $100 off if you use the code FFTV, all caps FFTV, and go to freedomfest.com, and you can register for the regular registration. You can pay a little bit extra, bring a guest. You can pay a little bit extra and come to one of these special exclusive events where you have breakfast, lunch, and different receptions that are going on. So, and of course, you'll get to see Jeff Berwick speak. Jeff, what specifically are you going to be talking about? I think you're on a panel, and you're speaking a couple times, right?
I think so. I've been talking to Mark about what we're going to do exactly, but I think I'm going to be on the
libertarian, a little bit. Some would call it extreme that are out there that are pushing the edge. Maybe not your normal conservatives, but more libertarian out there.
Yeah, I guess it's extreme to people who aren't anarchists, I guess. But for us, it's not very extreme at all. But it's going to be people like Doug Casey and Jeffrey Tucker on there, Angela Keaton of antiwar.com, all good friends of mine. And I'm going to be speaking on not only decriminalize all drugs, but decriminalize all things. Fantastic. So I'll be talking about that.
Well, Jeff, we really appreciate your time today. And you guys, everybody who's joined us, thank you so much. I want to specifically call out Kupaki, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name properly or not, but I want to call you out for inviting some of your friends in. Thank you very much. And John, you've been really active in the chat. And William, thank you so much for actually popping in to visit with us. So we do have some already recorded episodes of Freedom Fest TV, including one with Angela Keaton. It's right here in the replays. If you look down below, as soon as we close up, you'll see replays. And Angela Keaton talking about antiwar.com. Wayne Allen Root was on last week. Presidential candidate of the Libertarian Party, John McAfee and Austin Peterson were on in the last few days. So we really, really appreciate you guys being here. We're calling it Renegade Week at Freedom Fest TV. If you've got George Berwick on and John McAfee, I'd say you definitely have a good Renegade Week.
Yes, indeed. All right. And before we close it out, because we don't have the constraints of time per se, but Jeff, are you okay if we have one more question from someone in the audience? Okay, so if you're out there, you've got an opportunity. Here is your opportunity in life. You know, those opportunities come every so often. You've got a man who is a genius, who has created millions of dollars in the marketplace, affects hundreds of thousands of people. You can ask him a question directly. Just come on board, and we're ready for you. All it takes is one click, and there's no charge. We're not even charging Bitcoin on this one. So if someone has a question, great. But if not, well, then we will go ahead and proceed to wrap up. Jeff, if somebody wants to get in touch with you.
Actually, William asked a great question. He didn't pop back in this time, but he said he wanted clarification. You wanted to decriminalize all things? Are you kidding?
Yeah, you're going to have to come to Freedom Fest to hear what I have to say.
Well,
I think that would be a good thing to find out. And Jeff, if somebody wants to get in touch with you and they say, hey, I want to get to know more about this guy, I like Jeff, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you and to reach out?
Just go to dollarvigilante.com, and that's where I write every day on the evils of central banking and the state, and actually how to profit and survive through all the things they're doing. And then if you're interested in anarchy or freedom, just
exactly. Matter of fact, Gina and I watch Anarchast, Dollar Vigilante regularly. It's how we met Jeff years ago. Got a chance to see what he was doing, got involved, went to Anarchapulco, had a fabulous time with wonderful people that we can sit around and talk to about making money, of living life without controlling others. A wonderful opportunity. And I see that it couples greatly with Freedom Fest. Freedom Fest is an opportunity for you to meet wonderful people. I think the information we're going to have from the platform, and I can say this as the MC, is going to be fabulous. It's going to be great, but the thing that's going to be even better will be the people you meet, the people you encounter, the friendships and the bonds that you create is going to be even better. So it's something you definitely want to take in. Well, I'll tell you, this has been a thrill for me as the MC here at Freedom Fest TV to have one of my heroes and a good buddy of mine, Jeff Berwick, joining us. And Gina Carr, we thank you for being our engineer and helping us out on that. And glad that we can have each of you joining us today. And on behalf of Freedom Fest, the entire team, and Freedom Fest TV, I'm Terry Brock. Live freedom and enjoy life. Thanks for joining us and being here today. Bye now.
You have all the major central banks, Japan, UK, Europe, America, all printing staggering amounts of money. The people who are getting that money, Jeff, are very happy, and their friends are very happy.
I believe in 2020 that we will be back into a rip-roaring, snorting bull market.
They may increase interest rates by 0.25% to kind of prove to the world how responsible they are.
Government is always mankind's biggest enemy throughout human history. It always has been. It's what destroyed Rome. It's what everything that's every empire has collapsed, and every war and all the billions of people have been killed. It's all due to government. So it is always our enemy.